Hi everyone, Kurt here again, and today I'm going to be talking to you about classroom management. So let's jump right in. So the first thing you should be doing is asking yourself, what is classroom management? And I believe one of the common mistakes or misunderstandings that teachers have is that classroom management means disciplining the students, keeping order, getting mad when someone does something wrong. And maybe that's part of it, but it's a lot more than that. So it's a good idea to start thinking about how you manage your classroom so that your classroom is able to function at its highest level. And you'll see that there's some overlap here with my video on interaction, because actually having a good system for classroom management will improve the way that your students interact and behave and the kind of work that they do. Okay, so by definition, then, this comes from Brown and Lee in their book on teaching methods. The process of ensuring that classroom lessons run smoothly, considering a wide range of factors from the physical arrangement of the classroom to teaching styles and philosophy to classroom energy. So how do you put the students around? I know a lot of teachers in Taiwan, you don't really get a lot of choice in how you do the seats because you have so many students. You have to do the typical rows. But perhaps if you end up teaching at elementary school one day, or maybe if you're in a different type of school, you can think about the seating arrangement. But typically they're in rows. Okay, so moving on then, here are some general guidelines. And today's video is going to be pretty short, just a few tips, because in my opinion, being good at classroom management, it really depends on you and what type of teacher you are and how you are able to deal with your students. So there's no best method for everyone. Everyone needs to figure out their best way. Okay, but anyway, some general guidelines. So you need to have your roles clear. So as a teacher, what's my role? As a student, what's your role? And then stick to those roles that you've outlined. Make the goals and objectives very clear from the very beginning of your class. What is it that the students are expected to do in your class? Be flexible. If you make rules, you got to always consider every situation, and it doesn't always have to be black and white. Sometimes things can change to make the situation better. Give students some kind of choice. So a choice in content, choice in test types, activities, something. Let students have some control. Take a personal interest in the students. Ask them about their life other than just the mistakes they're making in their book. Be fair. It's okay to be strong, but be fair. And that means for every student in the classroom. Show enthusiasm and positivity. Show the students that, you know what, I enjoy you. I enjoy watching you learn, and you are all going to do well. Be that way no matter how they're acting. And challenge the students from all levels. So you can't just challenge your high level students. You have to challenge all levels of students all the time. And that will also lead into the next video, which is on differentiated learning, when we talk about the different levels of students. Okay, so a couple of small things, but it's important to know. The first one is talking about your voice. So when you're in the classroom, you have to make sure that the person farthest away can hear you clearly. So that means if you have a very, very soft voice, you have to use a microphone, or at least make it so that people can hear you. If they really have to struggle to hear you and you're speaking English, that will be double disaster for some students. Make sure you articulate clearly so that students can really hear. Don't mumble, don't talk too fast. Non-verbal messages are also very powerful. You don't have to shout all the time. Sometimes crossed arms and a mean look can be just as effective. Don't shout when you're talking to the students, when you're teaching. Be enthusiastic, but don't shout all the time. Students get tired of hearing shouting, and the more you shout, the less likely they are to actually listen to what you're saying. They're going to start turning off their ears, and all they're going to hear is noise. So shouting should be something that you pick and choose when is the best time. If you're angry, you don't have to shout. you can show that in other ways. Okay, body language. So your body posture is very important. It can show confidence. If your face shows optimism, brightness, and warmth, that is a great way to create this type of environment that you want. Your facial hand gestures, they enhance your meanings. And when teaching English, you should always be using your hands. When I say the word write, I write. And look, you can do some actions as well. It helps those lower level learners. Make eye contact with your students. Don't bury yourself in your notes all the time when you're teaching. You don't want to be looking down at your paper. You want to be looking at the students when you're talking to them. That will keep them more engaged. If you go up there and you turn your back on your students and you're looking at the board the whole time, they're not going to be engaged in what you're doing. They'll start doing their own thing. Don't just stand in one place for an hour. Move around, mix the class up. Students will get bored if that's what you're doing. Follow the rules of proxemics. Don't stand too close. Don't stand too far away. I think we know people who do that. Some talk very close to your face and some are really, really far away. Just find the comfortable distance. Some students, even though they may act like they really like you, they don't like it when your face comes in too close to their face. It will make them feel uncomfortable. And of course, dress appropriately. You don't have to wear a suit or, a ball gown to go into the classroom, but you should look professional and it should show that I'm serious about the job that I'm doing. If your clothes look too casual, maybe the students will think you are also casual. Okay, now this is something that we did in the classroom, but it's okay. It's something that you should think about on your own as well. And the title of this slide is called Unplanned Teaching, which is something that's going to happen all the time. So what you should do is you should look at these 7, you should pause the video, and you should think about how would I deal with these in the classroom? And if you have no idea, then you should start planning. You should start thinking ahead. So, because they will all happen, all of them. Okay, so I'll quickly go through all 7, how I would deal with them if it happened in my own classroom. But just remember that context is important. Maybe today I would do it one way, tomorrow I'll do it a different way, depending on what's going on. But to keep it simple, I'll just, in general, talk about what I would do. So the first one, your students digress and throw off the plan for the day. And when I used to teach children, I was guilty of this all the time. They would start to, they knew how to ask me questions in a way that would get me off topic. And then we would have some very lively debates and things like that. But the thing is with that one, I would always let it happen unless I really had to finish something, because as long as the students were interacting with me and asking me questions and we were using English to communicate, I never could see why that was a bad thing. And this is an example of you being a resource or a facilitator. This is how students choose the topic to learn. They start to ask you questions and then you go with it and you talk about it, you share, you ask them questions. Now they're using English to learn something that they want to learn. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Number 2, you digress and throw off the plan for the day. So this has happened to me a lot. In the middle of my teaching, I get what we call a light bulb moment. And I think, you know what? I want to do something different because I feel like it will match the students. It's fine. I go that way, I do it, and then I make up the other stuff that I missed another time, or give some extra homework, or I make a video or something like that. An unexpected but pertinent question comes up. So my philosophy on this is, unless you're in the middle of an exam or class is already over, deal with the question when it comes up, because again, students are showing interest and they have a question. They are motivated to ask you. This is not something that happens a lot. So when it does, you should show the students you are willing to really answer their question. This will really help create this kind of environment where students want to interact with you. Some technicality prevents you from doing an activity. This is why in your lesson planning, you always need a plan B, always, especially if technology or something is the main source of the activity. If the power goes out, the internet goes down, these things happen. And so what will you do afterwards? You can't just send the kids home, unfortunately. So you have to deal with this. Okay, you're asked a question you don't know the answer to. Now, many teachers, and I know this from experience, are too embarrassed to admit that they don't know something. My first suggestion is don't be that teacher. No one is an expert. And I honestly feel that a lot of students will disrespect you if you are too afraid to admit you're not an expert at everything. And I think that people will empathize and support you more when you show that you're very knowledgeable in your subject field, but sometimes you just don't know the answer. So what you should do, there's a couple different ways to do this, is say, you know what, that is a fantastic question. Well, right now we just don't have a lot of time. And so because of that, I will answer your question tomorrow when we have more time. This is one method to choose if you don't want to admit that you don't know the answer. Maybe you're new, you're trying to impress your students. It's okay. The second one is you can just say, you know what, that's a great question. I don't even know the answer to that, but I'm going to find the answer for you and I'll come back tomorrow with it. Or throw it to the class. Okay, everybody, this is a great question. Let's find the answer together. The only thing you shouldn't do is lie and say, the answer is blah, 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 but actually you're not sure if that's the answer. Because if the students find out that you're wrong, you've lost their respect and they might not ask you again. So be careful about that one. Okay, student is disruptive in class. There are many different ways to deal with this. The only suggestion I have is do not let that one disruptive student disrupt the entire class. So depending on who it is or what they've done, give them the small attention that they're looking for. But if they keep trying to get too much of your attention, now you have to deal with it so that you're not affecting others. I've seen teachers who sit there and they yell at students and they constantly are talking and threatening and punishing the whole class because one kid can't stop talking. And I always felt that's so unfair to the other students in class who are trying to learn. Okay, and then the last one, there isn't enough time at the end of a class to finish an activity that's already started. So you have to make a judgment call here. Usually if it's me, I won't even start the activity because if I think that I won't have enough time, I'll just say, you know what, we're gonna skip the activity and do it next week or next class. And for the final 10 minutes, we're gonna do something else. You should always be flexible. If you start an activity and it only gets half done, then what are you going to do next class? You're going to start the activity all over again, or you're going to jump back in? Maybe that's possible, but maybe the students will forget what they were doing. The purpose of an activity, typically, unless it's like a long-term, like 2-3 class activity, is you want the students to, in the moment, practice or do some deeper thinking of the content that you just taught them. And so if you get halfway through that and then have to stop, to me, it seems not very efficient. But again, you have to figure out what's going on for your situation. Okay, moving on. So remember, we're still talking about classroom management here. Some suggestions for large classes. Make sure you know all of their names. If you're an English teacher, learn their English names. Make them use English names. It's a good way to add to the environment. Give lots of interactive work. Try not to lecture all the time. Use pair and group work. Do more listening activities because listening will transfer to other skills. Let students get involved in peer editing, peer feedback, peer evaluation can save you some time and make it more interactive. If you give students like written work or listening, speaking homework that you need to listen to, maybe don't collect all the work from all the students at one time. Today is these 5, tomorrow is these 5, split it up. And if possible, try to get students to get into study groups or learning groups so they're helping each other to learn instead of you being responsible for all of it. Creates a very helpful environment in the classroom where students like to work together. Okay, now in terms of using English in the classroom, this is an issue. A lot of teachers will say, well, I'm teaching English, but nobody ever speaks English. It's always Chinese. So that's up to you. You have to set clear guidelines at the very, very beginning. Tell them this is English class and we're going to use a lot of English. And I don't care how good your English is. I don't care how many mistakes you use. The only way to get better is to use it. And so that's what we're going to do. So give them guidelines. They want to go to the bathroom, let them ask in English. They want to put their book away, they got to ask in English. Give them these kind of guidelines. But tell them why. Tell them what's the value. Why is it good for them to use English all the time? Try to stimulate their intrinsic motivation. Choose appropriate tasks. If it's too hard and they feel like it's a major struggle for them to use English, they'll just revert back to Chinese. And as I've said already lots of times, you got to create this English atmosphere, an atmosphere where they see English, they hear English, they know how important it is, and so they will be more willing to participate in it. Okay, now, of course, as I mentioned, classroom management is not only about discipline and order, but it is also about that. So some things for you to think about. The first one is authority. You have to be comfortable with it. This is really hard for some new teachers because you still feel like you are young and you are still one of the students. You are not that old. You're not the old teacher that you've always had. But in reality, we still feel like that even when we get to be old, like I am. You still feel like you're not that old. What you have to learn is that how the students see you. And they see you as the authority figure in class. You have to be able to be comfortable with that and accept it. Once you do, they will respect you more. Fairness is important. I mentioned this already. Codes of conduct, make sure that everybody's following the rules. They know what the rules are. Don't allow people to bend the rules. If they do, you have to deal with it. But again, you need to share your expectations with the students. If they know what is expected of them, it's more likely that they will actually do it. You have to be firm with students. Don't let them control the class in terms of discipline. If you have a rule and you've set it, they break it, then there has to be the punishment that was set. Okay, you can't just say, oh, okay, that's okay, we'll worry next time or something. Be very careful about student dignity. Never insult a student. Never say anything that can embarrass them. Always be very, very careful about this. Once you embarrass a student, you may lose them forever, especially at that junior high school age. Decorum. So I mentioned this one already. Don't waste class time focusing on one problem student. It's not fair that you spend 15 minutes per day disciplining and yelling at one student when you have 35 in your classroom. Find the source of the problem. So why is this student always acting out? You have to get to the source and try to deal with it. And if you can't, then you got to go to your school for help. You've got counselors, you've got the student affairs, contact the parents if you can, find out what the issue is and try to fix it. Okay. Teacher roles. So in your classroom, as I mentioned before, you have to accept the many ways that students will perceive you. They're not all going to view you as the best friend that you want to be to them. Some of them are going to see you as mean. Some will think you're nice. Some will think you're boring. Some will think you're funny. It doesn't matter. Not everyone is going to see you the same way. But be consistently fair to all students equally. This one is very important. It doesn't matter if they like you or don't like you. You have to be fair to everyone. Don't be petty. If you're not fair, students will have negative feelings to you and also to each other. The one that you're nicer to, people will start to treat that student in an unfair way. Okay, teaching style. The style that you bring into the classroom, I can't stress this enough. It should match your personality style. Learn to capitalize on your own strengths rather than trying to be someone you're not. Don't let a teacher, trainer, or a friend tell you, hey, you need to be more humorous in the classroom. You're too boring. You're too serious. Look, you're either a serious person or you're not. You're either a funny person or you're not. Don't try to make yourself somebody that you're not. You will start to hate teaching because you can't be yourself. Of course, you have to change a little bit because you are now in control of a classroom. You are not the student in the back row, but you have to really rely on who you are, and then find activities, find methods that match your style. All right, so here is a list of continuum. A list of continuum, of opposite personalities. So you can look at this, and I have a question for you in class to discuss as well. You can think about each one of these and try to determine who you are. And what you want to find out is which of these personality types will benefit your teaching and which of them will actually hurt your teaching. And in this way, you can actually start to think about who you are. So for example, let's go down to steady and moody. You may be a very moody person, and that's just who you are. Maybe there's nothing you can do about that. Okay, so now you know that. I know that I'm a moody person. So what things should I be careful of? Okay, I know that I'm a very formal person. And so do I expect that my students have to be formal as well? Well, what if they're not formal? Should I judge them? You start to think about this as a teacher. And then maybe you can start to create a style that works the best for you. Okay, now the very end of this classroom management video, we talk about how to create a positive classroom, how to create this environment where students maybe are more well-behaved, they're more engaged, and they can be more interactive, and actually they will learn more. So the first one is to establish rapport. Now, establish rapport doesn't mean to be their best friends. It means to be on the same team kind of thing. So how do you do that? You show interest in them. You give them feedback on their progress. You openly ask for their opinions and feelings. Don't tell them their opinions are always wrong. Value and respect what they say. Now we have this expression in English, I'm laughing with you, not at you. And it's really important. You don't want them to feel embarrassed when you laugh. You want to laugh together. Teach them. When you make a mistake, laugh. Show them it's funny. It's okay to make mistakes. Work with them, not against them. You're not having a competition with your students. You are trying to let them get better and better. And develop genuine joy when they succeed. If they can feel that you're happy for them, that will mean a lot. Okay, the second step is to balance your praise and your criticism. You need both, but it needs to be balanced. So offer effective praise often. Critical feedback is necessary too. Now, usually what I like to do, you don't have to follow this way, but I read it in a book before and I try to do this, and I find that it's easier to give critical feedback if you start with some praise first. So say something good, then give them the critical feedback on their mistakes, and then finish with something good again. That way the student doesn't feel bad at the very beginning, and they don't feel bad at the very end, and they realize, look, I did something good, okay, I did something bad, but I also did another thing good. That will actually help with their self-efficacy and their motivation as well. Okay, now, in terms of critical feedback, you have to be careful you don't over-criticize. It's why you should never point out every mistake a student makes, because over-criticizing will lead to indifference. If I know everything I do is wrong, then why should I care? Lower self-efficacy, higher anxiety. I'm so terrified to give my work to my teacher because they're just going to tell me what's wrong. They'll participate less, they have more self-doubt, and you will create a negative atmosphere. If you are constantly yelling at your students and criticizing what they do, of course, no one is going to be happy to interact in this type of environment. Okay, number 3 is generate energy. Okay, this is the last one. Energy in your classroom is so important. Now, I got some quotes here, so you can read them on your own, but let me read them for you as well. Energy is the electricity of many minds caught up in a cycle of thinking and talking and writing. Energy is the aura of creativity sparked by the interaction of students. Energy drives students toward higher engagement and participation. Students and teachers take energy with them when they leave the classroom and they bring it back the next day. These are all very true. You have to be the guide or the facilitator to create that energy in the classroom. Okay, that's it, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.